Okay, everyone, I'd like to welcome you to the Cumberland County Water Resources Forum. This forum is being put on as a collaborative effort with the Cumberland Conservation Collaborative, Cumberland County Planning, and the South Mountain Partnership. My name is Rick Rovegno. I'm president of the board of the Cumberland Conservation Collaborative. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, and we are an association of groups and organizations which are passionate and supportive and working in issues of environmental preservation and outdoor recreation. One of our principal missions is educational, which is the reason we're here having and hosting this forum tonight. I do understand and hope she's on. If Commissioner Jean Fauci is on. Jean, are you here yet? And if she's not, I'll continue. I'll give her just a moment. She may be coming on a little bit later, and wanted everybody to know that she is deeply appreciative and supportive of the matters we work on. Our moderator this evening is Commissioner Vince DiFilippo. Vince is serving in his second term as Cumberland County Commissioner. Vince was the board chairman in his first term. Prior to public service, Vince worked in the health insurance industry for more than 30 years. A Cumberland County resident for 33 years, Vince served 10 years as Silver Spring Township Supervisor and was a member of the Cumberland County Agricultural Land Preservation Board for 8 years and chairman for 3 years. Commissioner DiFilippo also serves as liaison for a number of boards and commissions, including the County Ag Land Preservation Board and the County Conservation District. Vince, originally from Avondale, Chester County, is the son and grandson of farmers. At a young age, Commissioner DiFilippo learned the importance of farming and caring for this non-renewable natural resource, as well as the relevance of government. Despite long hours of farming, Vince's father was very active in politics in Chester County. Vince has a bachelor's in business administration from Goldie Beacon College in Delaware. Vince, an avid golfer, fisherman, loves listening to 60s and 70s music and bluegrass. Vince spends a lot of time outdoors and also enjoys reading about American history, cryptozoology, astronomy, and the Bible. One of 4 children of the late William S. and Betty Ann DiFilippo, Vince has one daughter, Rebecca, and a grandson, Alexander, who was born December 3rd, 2019. Commissioner DiFilippo, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Rick. And thank you, everyone, for putting this forum together. We're blessed to have a number of speakers tonight who will give us some information about the importance of water in Cumberland County and how municipal governments and others are working to protect this shared natural resource. I'd like to start out tonight with our first speaker, Katie Hess. She is the director of the South Mountain Partnership and director of Pennsylvania Landscape Conservation, Appalachian Trail Conservancy. Katie is going to talk a little bit tonight about the water program update. Katie.
Thank you, Commissioner. So again, my name is Katie Hess. It's great to be here. I am the director of the South Mountain Partnership. And starting in 2021, I also began serving with the Appalachian Trail Conservancy as the Pennsylvania Director of Landscape Conservation for their organization as well. So the South Mountain Partnership is a local conservation landscape. There are 8 throughout the state of Pennsylvania, and we support the promotion and the preservation of our region's farmland, historic places, and natural and recreational assets. Since about 2006, we have been bringing together local citizens, businesses, nonprofits, universities, and local and state agencies and officials who live, work, and play here in the South Mountain region, which is Adams, Cumberland, Franklin, and York counties. So we ended up working, concentrating on water resources beginning in 2018, and we set the goal that we would continue that focus on water resources through 2021. And We learned from our planning department committee members about the county whips that they were being drawn into, and the need to just improve water quality in our local waterways for a plethora of reasons: drinking water, recreation, just long-term sustainability. And this launched us into focusing our agendas of our regional meetings and our workshops to focus on bringing together local government, who is ultimately responsible for protecting local water quality and quantity for the people of Cumberland County, together with local water groups like watershed associations and creek cleanup groups. We also shifted our programming and our funding to support local governments and counties in meeting pollution reduction goals. Then we started supporting implementation of Cumberland County's clean water, I think it's called, your organization is called Cumberland County's Clean Water Countywide Action Plan. It's a little bit of a tongue twister. And we're supporting them by creating regional water quality forums. We facilitated the development of a mapping tool to aid in parcel prioritization, making sure that when we're investing best practices, that they're going in at the right locations that are actually going to return a pollution reduction measurement. And we fostered landowner outreach reporting for additional counties. Some of you might know this as restoration reports. Because of our ability to leverage some of our funding along with the National Farmland Trust, we're able to make sure that every county in the South Mountain region now has access to restoration tools. Our mini grant program is currently open, and we are prioritizing projects that have many collaborators and projects that address water resource issues and have measurable outcomes. We prioritize issues and projects that address water pollution reduction goals of municipalities and counties, meaning actions and plans that have already been adopted by our municipalities and counties, and goals that they've already set for themselves around water management, watershed restoration, and implementation of protection plans adopted by those local governments. In addition, projects such as those that reduce TMDL or wellhead protection plans would also be prioritized. So if that sounds like something that you may be interested in learning more about in terms of our mini grant program, our pre-applications are a very short one-page form. They are due by Friday, May 28th. And the details about the application are available on our website at southmountainpartnership.org. Also, I'll just put in a little plug. If you're not already on our newsletter, please join our newsletter. If you go to our homepage, it'll be right there at the bottom. Scroll to the bottom and put your email in. Also consider joining our Friends of the South Mountain Partnership group and attend our next meeting. Our fall partnership meeting is an educational forum and a networking forum for people like you. And that will be held on Friday, September 17th from 9 a.m. to 12 noon. Thank you again to everyone, especially Andy, who has helped to coordinate today's event. I'm very pleased to be here, and I hand it back over to you, Commissioner.
Vince, I'm sorry, this is Rick. I understand that Commissioner Fauci has joined us, and I told her she could briefly say hello. Thank you.
Jean, are you there?
Let me make sure that she has the ability to unmute herself. I just need to change her status.
Okay.
Well, thanks. Thank you, Katie. Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Vince. I'm so glad to be here tonight. You know, clean water is so important, and it's a resource that I believe we take for granted. And Cumberland County is a growing county. And as people arrive in Cumberland County, there's going to be an expectation that we have clean water, that people will be able to drink it, to do their laundry with it, to shower with it, to bathe with it. And I'm so glad for our partnerships and for the county's Clean Water Action Plan, so that we can move forward as the Class 3 county that we are, and have a future that is excellent for the people who want to live here. And thank you so much for having me tonight.
Thank you, Jean. Appreciate your time tonight and those words. Before we continue with the program, I just want to mention, if anyone has any questions during the forum, we will get to them at the end of the forum, but please feel free to submit them at any time, and we will then address them. Thank you. And now I'd like to, introduce Sabrina Haydt. She is a water program specialist for the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, and she's going to provide a brief history of Pennsylvania's safe drinking water. Sabrina, welcome and thank you.
All right, good evening. Thank you very much. Yes, so I'm going to provide a brief history of the Pennsylvania Safe Drinking Water program in Pennsylvania. So next slide, please. Specifically, I am going to give a brief history of drinking water regulations in Pennsylvania, also a history of waterborne disease outbreaks that led us to the regulations. And then I'm going to talk about our Chapter 109 regulations, which are what we use to make sure that our public drinking water is safe for everybody in the state. So the first drinking water law in the state was passed in 1905 and was titled the the Public Water Supply Law. Then in 1984, the Pennsylvania Safe Drinking Water Act was passed, which was actually 10 years after the federal Safe Drinking Water Act was passed. And the following year in 1985, Pennsylvania received primacy, primary enforcement authority from EPA over the federal Safe Drinking Water Act, which meant that we could then regulate our own water systems. Next slide. So I'm just going to look at each of these in a little bit more detail now. So the drinking water first came under regulation in Pennsylvania in 1905 with the passage of the Public Water Supply Law. And the 1905 law was passed in response to widespread cholera and typhoid fever outbreaks that had been attributed to microbiological contamination of public water supplies. And approximately 1,200 systems in the state of Pennsylvania were regulated under this law for about 20 contaminants that the U.S. Public Health Service at the time had established drinking water standards for. And the law required all public water suppliers to file with the Commissioner of Health a certified copy of the plans and surveys of the waterworks, and to obtain a written permit for all new waterworks prior to construction. Next slide. Under the 1905 Public Water Supply Law, Pennsylvania led the nation in waterborne disease outbreaks, averaging 8 to 10 per year. So obviously that law wasn't doing a very good job. And in fact, from 1971 to 1980, Pennsylvania reported 20% of all US waterborne disease outbreaks, more than any other state in the nation. And public water supplies in Pennsylvania were regulated under the 1905 law for almost 80 years, when a new wave of waterborne disease outbreaks necessitated the establishment of better authorities to protect public health in Pennsylvania. And the prevalence of Giardiasis outbreaks from Giardia in the water continued into the late 1980s. And many of these outbreaks were attributed to unfiltered surface water and groundwater under the direct influence of surface water. We had at the time more than 230 unfiltered surface water systems in the state, serving inadequately treated water to tens of thousands of people. And then many smaller water systems also lacked adequate disinfection facilities for pathogen control. So it wasn't a great time in our drinking water history. Next slide. And then in 1984, the Public Water Supply Law was replaced with the passage of the Pennsylvania Safe Drinking Water Act. after several communities experienced waterborne disease outbreaks caused by the presence of Giardia in their drinking water. And then the following year, as I had previously said, 1985, Pennsylvania received primacy to use their Chapter 109 drinking water regulations, which is what we still use today. Of course, there have been many updates since then, but that's what we use to regulate our water systems in the state of Pennsylvania. Next slide. So now that we've discussed the laws in place, next slide. Now that we've discussed the laws in place for regulating our drinking water, I'm just going to talk a bit about why we need these laws in place in the first place. So as I mentioned with the previous slides, both the Public Water Supply Law and the PA Safe Drinking Water Act were promulgated in response to waterborne disease outbreaks. There were several cholera and typhoid fever outbreaks in Philadelphia, which I'm actually going to discuss in a little bit more detail. However, it's important to mention a few others around the country as well. One of them is the Milwaukee Cryptosporidium outbreak in 1993, which was the largest waterborne disease outbreak in history. There were 430,000 individuals that became ill and 54 died. And this was caused by improperly treated surface water. And then in 2000 in Walkerton, Canada, actually our neighbor to the north, they had an E. coli outbreak, which caused 2,300 individuals to be ill out of a population of 5,000. So half of their population became ill and 7 died. Then more recently in Alamosa, Colorado, there was a salmonella outbreak at a water system that had a waiver to not use disinfection. So the reason I mention all of these is because outbreaks such as this are what trigger the federal government to update and generate new regulations, which then in Pennsylvania, we adopt and regulate as well. So ultimately, we're all trying to get to better water in the state. Next slide. So it is first important when we're talking about an outbreak to understand what an outbreak is. According to the Centers for Disease Control, a waterborne disease outbreak is defined as 2 or more people that are linked epidemiologically by time, location of exposure to water, and type of illness. And to determine the outbreak, epidemiologic evidence must implicate the water as the probable source of illness. And environmental evidence can be important for implicating water as the source of infection. So oftentimes, when we think we have an outbreak, we'll go out and make sure we take samples, or the Department of Health will take samples to confirm that, yes, this pathogen is in fact in the drinking water. Next slide. So I said I would talk about the Philadelphia outbreaks a little bit more. In the 1800s, Philadelphia began using the Schuylkill River as its primary source of drinking water. And unfortunately, upstream industry wastes and sewage were being dumped into the river, which resulted in highly contaminated water being served to the population of the city. And this result was, we had 2 large outbreaks. We had several of cholera and typhoid, but the 2 cholera outbreaks, one in 1832, left 935 individuals dead. And then in 1849, from May to September, there were 1,012 individuals that died. Next slide. And then this graph demonstrates how chlorination helped reduce the amount of deaths caused by typhoid fever by those served by the Philadelphia Water Department. So as you can see, the number of deaths from typhoid fever each year were quite large, with an average of 575 between 1886 and 1913. And at that point, chlorination was installed, and you can see after that, the number of deaths dramatically decreased. Next slide. So in comparison, here is a graph of Pennsylvania waterborne disease outbreaks since the Chapter 109 Safe Drinking Water regulations were promulgated in 1985. And as you can see, the peak was actually around 1992, which was shortly after the Pennsylvania filter rule came about in 1989. And the reason for that is all the public water systems hadn't yet had a chance to make the necessary improvements to their water system to meet the requirements of the rule. But you can see then in 1994, 95, 96, it severely dropped off after that because of these new regulations we put in place. Next slide. And this slide shows the history of Pennsylvania Giardiasis outbreaks. And again, as you can see, the majority occurred prior to the Pennsylvania filter rule of 1989. Next slide. I just wanted to come back to this slide quickly. It looks like the blue bubbles off just a little bit, but you can see there's two peaks there. So everything was calm for quite a bit. And then in recent history, we have had a few more outbreaks spiking up again. And those are primarily from Legionella, which is an emerging contaminant of concern. So, you know, just because we have all these regulations in place doesn't mean we don't have to keep striving to improve things. So that's one of the things we're focusing on now. Next slide. So now that we understand what a waterborne disease outbreak is and why we have all these regulations, I just wanted to briefly talk about our Pennsylvania Chapter 109 regulations, which is what we use to enforce our Safe Drinking Water Act. So Chapter 109 regulations are based on the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act regulations, which established national limits on contaminant levels in drinking water to ensure that water is safe for human consumption. And these are known as maximum contaminant levels, or MCLs. And the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act regulations also establish how often public water systems must monitor for contaminants and how the results of monitoring are reported. So since Pennsylvania has primacy over the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act and the regulations, because we have our own regulations, Chapter 109 must be at least as stringent as the federal regulations. Okay, next slide. So just to show you the scope of Chapter 109, I've been talking about all these regulations and how we regulate public water systems. Well, how many public water systems do we have? So this is from the 2019 Annual Compliance Report, and this data was compiled last June. So about a year ago, this is the number of systems we had. So in Pennsylvania, we had 8,492 public water systems that served a population of just under 13 million people, 12,920,000. Now the Pennsylvania state population is actually just under that at around 12,800,000 and some. But because of non-community water systems, most Pennsylvanians drink public water on a routine basis, even if they have their own well at their own home, because they go out to restaurants or they go to a place of business, and those are public water systems. Now, since this is the Cumberland County Watershed Forum, I thought I'd give you just a few statistics on Cumberland County water systems. And as of today, there are 105 regulated public water systems in Cumberland County. And I'll get into the types of those water systems and how many there are in your county in just a minute. Next slide. So before we can discuss the definition of a public water system, I'm sorry, I didn't realize there's animation here. You can go ahead and, yep, there we go. It's important, you could just go back one. Before we discuss the definition of a public water supply, it is important to explain what a system is considered under our regulations. And a system is a group of facilities that are geographically proximate or owned and managed by the same person that are used for pre-treatment, collection, treatment, storage, and distribution. All right, next slide. And then a public water system is a system that provides water for human consumption, which has 15 or more service connections, or regularly serves an average of 25 or more people daily, at least, or at least 60 days out of the year. And when we say human consumption, we're talking about drinking, bathing, showering, dishwashing, cooking, and oral hygiene. So if a facility has its own source of water that's available to 25 or more people at least 60 days out of the year, it's a public water system. So these are the types of public water systems we have in Pennsylvania. And this is how we further classify them. So a community water system is what most people think of when they think public water. And that's a system that provides water to the same population year round. And examples of this are municipal systems, authorities, mobile home parks, or residential developments. So think like the city of Harrisburg, the city of Carlisle, places like that. And in Cumberland County, there's 29 community water systems. The non-transient, non-community water systems is a public water system that regularly serves at least 25 of the same people at least 6 months out of the year. And examples of this are schools, factories, hospitals, office buildings, places like that. And there's 22 non-transient, non-community water systems in Cumberland County. And then transient water systems are a system that caters to transitory customers in non-residential areas, such as campgrounds, motels, restaurants, and of course, they have to have their own supply of water. And there's 54 of those in Cumberland County. So then the last set of water systems we kind of lump together because they have the same requirements are, we call BVRB systems, but they're bottled, vended, retail, and bulk hauling systems. So private homeowner wells are not state regulated. Some municipalities have regulations, but they're not state regulated. These are all just public water systems I'm talking about. All right, so next slide. So in conclusion, there has been a long history of regulating drinking water in Pennsylvania. And the Pennsylvania Safe Drinking Water Program is essential to ensure that Pennsylvania residents and visitors are protected from microbiological, chemical, and radiological contaminants in drinking water. So my last two slides are just some sources I used and my contact information. So I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabrina. Next in our forum are two representatives from the Cumberland Area Economic Development Corporation, the Chief Executive Officer, Jamie Keener, and the Chief Operations Officer, Shireen Farr. And they're going to talk about the economic development benefits of clean water and open space. So Jamie or Shireen, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Appreciate the opportunity to participate in this forum and to show you how water impacts our economy. I am going to take the majority of this with Shireen weighing in as needed more on the tourism side. So we look forward to this session and to ongoing dialogue regarding the importance of water to each of us personally, but also to the many industries that call home Cumberland County and the water that they rely on. Next slide. So setting the stage, I'd like to brief you on CAEDC'S recently completed strategic plan and how it fits the topic of water, this evening's topic. Knowing that we have a very diverse economy in Cumberland County, and with CAEDC serving a dual role of economic development and tourism promotion agency, we decided that a healthy economic development balance was needed to grow our economy while preserving our natural resources and our quality of life. And I will comment that Commissioner Fasci was instrumental in some of the comments that she had made during one of our strategic planning sessions that really drove this healthy economic balance to where it is today. So our mission then is to promote and advance the overall economic health of Cumberland County. Again, putting everything in balance, businesses, employees, and our residents, and the environment. And we want to retain our attractiveness. Thus, our vision is that businesses, residents, and tourists choose Cumberland County to work, live, learn, and play. And then to realize our mission and vision, we developed 4 priorities, one of which I'm going to speak to here. That is to facilitate a healthy economic development ecosystem in the county. That is the one most associated with water and our natural resource preservation. So we want to attract and grow businesses that provide life-sustaining jobs for our residents while preserving our natural resources. We don't want to attract businesses that are not mindful of our quality of life and our sustainable future. Next slide. So Cumberland County is blessed to have many natural resources. While many are not water, I thought it'd be appropriate to mention them as they are part of our environmental ecosystem. They are a globally important bird area in the Kittatinny Ridge, 2 state forests, the Micho and the Tuscarora State Forest, 3 state parks, including Kings Gap Environmental Education Center, Colonel Denning, and Pine Grove Furnace, 4 state game lands, 140 plus municipal parks, over 3,500 acres of federal parklands, over 200 miles of trails, 45 miles of Appalachian National Scenic Trail, and 2 Pennsylvania scenic rivers and 3 official water trails. Those 2 scenic rivers, while not necessarily rivers, are the Yellow Breeches Creek and the Latort Spring Run. And our 3 water trails are the Yellow Breeches Creek, the Connequina Creek, and the Susquehanna River. Next slide, please. So what is the estimated value of natural resources to our economy and our quality of life? To me, it's priceless. But here are a few figures, albeit not up to date as I'd like. As you might see, it's 2006. That was the latest data that we had in our inventory. Certainly would be looking to renew that with an upcoming study. But considering the pie chart to the right, it's a value range up to $730 million in 2006. And it's safe to assume that based on those dollars in that year, that we're likely approaching or exceeding $1 billion in today's dollars. Next slide, please. So lumping in water with open space, as I said earlier, they all contribute to our environmental ecosystem. There's value generated through these 4 areas that we are identifying. Revenue generation via the sale of goods and services. Recently, we have seen interest in our county from beverage manufacturers and bottlers. Our position in the Northeast U.S. logistics market provides for an ideal location to manufacture and distribute beverages to nearly 50% of the U.S. economy in a day's drive. Again, cutting down on logistics costs, putting more money to the bottom line and increasing our economy. Can also realize that through wealth generation via higher property values and earnings from open space related activities. We see that through increased tax revenues, waterfront properties typically command a higher price tag. Unless it's in a floodplain, then it may not. And through avoided costs, much of which is not often talked about, but those costs that might have been spent on the provision of environmental services, such as improving water quality or amending impaired streams. And again, some of the talk that we've heard already this morning, we're talking about improving impaired streams through our plan. Next slide, please. So what are some of the benefits to the economy? Certainly our outdoor recreation is one of the things on our tourism side that we market very effectively. Our outdoor recreation, and it's a broad range, but depending on the activities, can be anywhere from about $205 million to over $500 million. It affects between 2,500 and 7,000 jobs, and it generates state and local tax revenues between $15 and $39 million. So absolutely has an impact. Again, we're tying in open space, our trails and water. On the bottom left there, you see one of the water trails. So absolutely has an environmental impact and an economic impact on our economy. So yes, water and other aspects of our environmental ecosystem are important to our quality of life and our economy, and we want to continue to maintain those as best we can. Have any questions, or I guess we'll follow up with questions at the end. Put the questions in the chat, and if they're relative to tourism, then we'll have Shireen address them later. Thank you very much. Back to you, Commissioner DiFilippo.
Okay. Thank you, Jamie. Next on in the forum here is we'll have Kristi English, who is a Source Water State Protection Lead, the Source Water State Protection Lead for Pennsylvania American Water. And she's going to talk about protecting our drinking water system, supplies, excuse me. So Kristi.
Thank you, Commissioner. So I just wanted to give a little update about protecting our drinking water supplies. Next slide, please. So just a little bit about us. Pennsylvania American Water is the largest investor-owned water and wastewater service provider in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We have approximately 1,100 employees that serve 2.4 million people in 36 different counties in the state. We have about 672 water customers and 77,000 wastewater customers. Next slide, please. So when you say source water protection, what is it? So it's a proactive approach to safeguard, maintain, or improve quality or quantity of our drinking water sources. So it involves us identifying upstream land uses and addressing potential impacts that those activities may have on our water supplies. So why do we do this? Our priority is to provide clean and reliable drinking water to the communities we serve. This starts at the source. It's our first step in the process. Protecting our sources of supply supports the overall treatment process and benefits the community as a whole. So how do we do this? We're advocates for stewardship of water resources and the environment. We work with partners upstream in our watersheds and challenges that could impact sources of supply now or in the future. We do this by working with the SRBC, the Susquehanna River Basin Commission. We're part of the Lower Susquehanna Source Water Protection Steering Committee meetings. We are involved with the NRCS, so the Natural Resource Conservation. And we also get involved with different townships and municipalities. So what we're trying to do with source water protection is pollution is one of the most common threats to sources of drinking water. Source water protection involves identifying upstream land uses and addressing potential impacts those activities may have on water quality. So this helps us as a company and as a drinking water system to understand and prepare for changes in raw water quality at our intakes and our wells. So some of the measures we take to promote source water protection and to do source water protection in our company is we have developed source water protection plans through the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection Source Water Protection Technical Assistance Program. So I'm going to just say SWP for short because that's way easier to say. But through SWP, all of our systems have either developed or have draft modes of our source water protection plans. So our source water protection plans identify and mitigate potential risks to our sources of contamination. We also look at potential sources located upstream of our surface water intakes. Another part of our program is we monitor for change in raw water quality at all of our surface water intakes. We establish contingency plans to prepare and respond in case of potential contamination. We engage the community through outreach and education, which I'll talk about on our next slide. And then we also partner with communities, agencies, and non-government organizations on different watershed efforts. So on this slide, we talk about our community partnerships that we have. We sponsor an environmental grant program, a Protect Our Watersheds art contest that is open to grades 4 through 6 in any of the service areas that we serve. The Stream of Learning scholarships, which is $1,000 scholarships that are awarded to students seeking further education in the water and wastewater industry. We also have firefighting support grant program. So firefighters can submit different grants for different types of equipment. We also do a lot of plant tours, school visits, and open houses. This year with COVID, we couldn't do any in-plant tours or school visits because of all the restrictions, but we did a lot of virtual this year, and we hope to incorporate that in the future years. We also have community and charitable support. We host our wonderful World of Water summer camps. We were supposed to have a great one this year in Cumberland County, and with COVID, we had to cancel it. But we're hoping to pick that up next year. That is open to ages 7 through 11 children. And we bring them in for a week and we talk about all these different water activities from start to finish, how to treat water, how to do a filter challenge, a bunch of different cool activities. And it's free cost to the students. We also have the National Night Out and Community and Fire Company festivals. And a couple things locally. Upper Allen Township did get a environmental grant from us to the Grantham Park Pond restoration phase. We've also given grants to the Cumberland County Recycling and Waste Authority, the East Pennsboro Township, and Silver Spring Township for rain barrels was in 2019. And just released yesterday, Lower Allen Township got a $5,000 grant for water sampling for analysis in Cedar Run in the Yellow Breeches Creek, which is fabulous because the Yellow Breeches Creek is one of our sources of supply. So that worked out very well. Next slide, please. And I just kind of want to highlight these recent community programs. I know we just awarded the 2020 Environmental Grant Program, the Stream of Learning Scholarship, and the Protect Our Watersheds Art Contest. This is something I'm really trying to push with schools this year to get more active participants involved. These are great forms of scholarship. The Protect Your Watershed Art Contest, we post the winning picture on wildflower plant cards that you plant the whole card and wildflowers grow. And it's a really neat concept. And so I just wanted to take a minute and elaborate more on those. Next slide, please. So watershed protection, this is something we try and drive home with our messaging. We have a lot of bill inserts. We are producing signage for our reservoirs that are opening up for fishing. Just to talk a little bit about watershed protection. So use non-toxic products. If we could limit fertilizers and pesticides, because those all end up in our drinking water sources. Check your car for leaks. Use commercial car wash systems. Service your septic system, clean up after your pets, and community cleanup events are super important. Any little thing helps protect the watershed, and we all live in a watershed, so we all have to protect it. Next slide, please. And then I just want to talk a simple way to manage stormwater, and since we sponsored an environmental grant for rain barrels, I just wanted to talk about rain barrels using. It's a simple way for homeowners to contain a small portion of the precipitation from their roofs and reuse it in a sustainable way. So not only are rain barrels inexpensive, but they're also easy to install and require little maintenance. I built a house last year and we have one and I love it because I'm just starting to be able to water my garden with it. It's awesome. So the rain that runs off the roofs and other surfaces can seep into the ground or travel across the land, often picking up sediment and contaminants along the way. So much of this runoff flows into a storm drain and ultimately enters nearby tributaries. So why not recycle this water and put it into a more practical use? Rain barrels enable homeowners to collect a portion of this water and use it to water plants, gardens, etc. So reusing rainwater not only helps conserve water and save on the household bill, it can slow runoff, it can lessen the impact on the collection system, and it can also help reduce flooding potential as well as combined sewer overflows. So it helps to protect our watersheds and our water quality. Next slide, please. And kind of just to drive it all home in closing, is we all live in a watershed. It doesn't matter what part of the state, what part of the country we live in, what can we do to protect it? And next slide just has my contact information if anyone wants to contact me afterwards. And I'd like to thank you so much for having me and to talk about source water protection.
Great, thank you, Kristi. Appreciate your presentation. We'll move along now. We have tonight a representative from the Berks County Conservation District, Mr. Kent Himelright. Welcome, Kent. Kent is the Bucks County Source Water Protection Coordinator and Watershed Coordinator. And he's here with us tonight to speak about the Berks County Source Water Protection Program. Kent, welcome.
Very good. Yeah, don't worry. I say Bucks County all the time too. Happy to be here with you all this evening. Berks County, we're out here on the eastern side of the state. We're kind of a true transition county between the metropolitan of Philadelphia and the prime ag lands of Lehigh Valley, and then we get into like Appalachia and coal country up in the northern part of Berks County. We don't really fit into one category, so we just kind of hang out with everybody. But yeah, great to be here tonight. And if you can advance that slide there, we'll get going here. And a lot of writing here, but just some fast facts for you guys. Berks County Source Water Protection Program. It's sponsored by Berks County Planning Commission, Berks County Water and Sewer Association, and the Center for Excellence in Local Government. That's a subset of Albright College here. That's a local college here in the city of Reading. You kind of have a three-head of leadership with this program, where you have local government with the County Planning Commission, the private sector and the Water and Sewer Association, and then the academia with the CELG and Albright College. Since 2012, the Water and Sewer Association in this program has been able to funnel 35 large, medium, and small water systems in the county towards DEP's Source Water Protection Technical Assistance Program, SWP and as many might know, that is a free technical service that DEP provides to public water systems to develop source water protection plans. In 2017, our program developed its own countywide source water protection plan. At the time, we could boast this. I don't know if it's still true today, but it was the first countywide source water protection plan in Pennsylvania. Individual systems in our county still have to get their own plans and follow their own plans. Our countywide action plan is kind of like our strategic plan, really. It just kind of guides our program. Also helps guide the individual systems as well, kind of leading by example. The countywide plan covers over 275,000 drinking water customers here in Berks County. That's 65% of our population. I think our population is a little over 400,000. The other 35% might be on just private wells, rural wells. And then in 2018, we had the privilege of receiving the Governor's Award for Environmental Excellence. So it was fun. You can go ahead and advance. So just to break down our structure a little bit more, I spoke on the CELG, Center for Excellence in Local Government. They're really great at intermunicipal partnerships and agreements. So it's a natural fit for us to have all these public water systems run through the CELG. That it's kind of like a CELG is kind of like a station wagon. And in the front of that station wagon is the Water and Sewer Association and County Planning Commission. They're up there driving it, navigating. And in the back seats are all the partners yelling, making all kinds of noise, saying, when are we going to get there? But being good partners. And that might be in all of our regulatory partners, EEP, DEP, regional water infrastructure partners, and then our partners in conservation. And then that station wagon's pulling this source water protection program. And that campus is full of great information, resources, and things like that. And the fuel, the Berks County Source Water Protection Program Coordinator, me. Now, not just me, but just the position of a coordinator. Coordinator keeps things moving forward, helps maintain partner engagement, assist existing and new systems with source water protection planning. Another fuel I could add in there is, your primary public water suppliers. You're having their involvement is a great fuel as well. All right, you can go to the next slide. Just wanted to touch on the timeline of how this all occurred into a countywide program. Countywide source water protection was recommended in our county 25 years ago. Not to say that it needs to take 25 years, but some of these things may have already occurred in other counties, but this is kind of having talked to people who are still around from the beginning. This is kind of how it unfolded. But back in the mid 90s, EPA and DEP were funding source water protection assessments of systems in boroughs or cities. And that kind of led to a county regionalization study for small water and sewer systems here in Berks County. Moving ahead about 5 years later, something else was great was happening. Philadelphia Water Department was saying, hey, our source water protection area is really the entire Delaware watershed. We have intakes on the Schuylkill River and the Delaware River, and our greater area is way upstream in these counties, in these ag areas, in these mining areas, and we need to work with those people. And they started to organize the Schuylkill Action Network with the help of DEP and EPA and so many regional partners. That really brought a lot of the players that are still involved with our program to the table and in the same room way back in 2013. Fast forward a little bit to 2017, county government wanted to update the regionalization studies. They looked at the CLG and their expertise in working with intermunicipal partnerships. And what was born out of that was the development of the Berks County Water and Sewer Association, which is made up of water systems, wastewater systems, vendors, local governments, conservation partners, you name it, are a part of that association. And the first year they held a conference, the topic that year was source water protection. Since 2013, it's kind of accumulated into about 2017, where we had our countywide plan developed and kind of this program was birthed. All right, you can move ahead there. Just a list of our members that are part of our program. These are all public water suppliers here. We've been very successful getting low-hanging fruit. We've gotten large, medium, and small systems from the large, you can see there, almost 90,000. That's the city of Reading Area Water Authority, down to the very small mobile home communities of just 50 residents. So a wide diversity of systems that have participated in this program. But yeah, the population are about 277,000 customers there. Go ahead, yeah, thank you. These are our important source water protection watersheds. Blue being surface water, and then poor choice of color here for you folks, but it's kind of like an off brown color there. I don't know if you can see it blends right in with my map, but those are our groundwater systems, and we kind of have some overlap in there. And essentially really 95% of our county flows to the Delaware watershed, only about 5% to the Chesapeake Bay. So essentially the whole county is in itself a source water protection area for Philadelphia Water. But majority of it, we've been able to get these systems into our countywide program here. Our two largest systems, Maiden Creek watershed, which all flows into Lake Onalani, the reservoir there, and then Tubble-Hawken watershed, which flows into Blue Marsh Lake. Both of those reservoirs are managed differently. Blue Marsh Lake being a U.S. Army Corps recreational area, so it's heavily used. Lake Onalani being primarily drinking water reservoir, very limited use by the public. You can hunt, you can walk, you can fish, that's about it. Go ahead and advance there. Just wanted to touch on our management strategies. These are kind of our guiding strategies that we address in almost every meeting we have. And when we're thinking about stuff, these are the strategies we're thinking about. But I just wanted to, I don't want to get too deep into it. I could spend a lot of time here, but just quick examples of how we do these management strategies. But we have our steering committee and our annual updates. So every year we have 4 quarterly meetings, and one of those meetings we dedicate to revisiting our plan and our implementation plan and revisiting these strategies. Public education is a big thing. We've developed education materials and templates that can be used system-wide, that anybody can pick up and modify for their individual system. source water protection zone notification. We've developed MOUs with our members so that we can use their zone GIS layers for county reviews, land development reviews. We can hand those GIS layers over to our county emergency services and even to local fire companies. Identifying potential source of contamination, participating in early warning systems. We have 2 warning systems in that we participate in. The local one is called the Knowledge Center. And essentially, anybody who signs up for it gets an email alert, say there's a truck that fell over on I-78, it spilled an unknown chemical. It'll tell you how much they think the chemical ran off. And usually if something like that happens, and it has happened, and it's close to like a potential zone, zone A or zone 1, I'm emailing that water provider, hey, do you know about this? Keep an eye out for it. Watershed management, we support and provide financial opportunities for source water protection areas and regional partners. We've been able to actually advocate for money for best management practices to come into our county. And that's been a good success story. Emergency planning, one thing that we did prior to COVID, we were working heavily with local fire departments and companies. They're the guys on the front line trying to talk about situational awareness, public, private wells, how to manage them. There's a lot of case studies out there where emergency services are great, but there are case studies out there where the response by the emergency service made a drinking water situation worse. And it was not their fault. They weren't just unaware. So we're just trying to help our first responders make quick, good decisions. Go ahead and next slide, please. I hit on this, but one thing that's really great, I really love is our use of our source water protection zone, our GIS layers. Our county uses them in their land development reviews, and it provides the drinking water provider a chance to comment if there's a project or land development going in really close to a well location or surface water intake. Gives them a chance to comment on that, whether that's going to impact their situation or not. And we are able to provide that to emergency services so that they can make those much better choices. It's kind of like a next step towards source water protection zoning, which is something that might be a next level. Go ahead and advance. Another success story is through our partnership with EPA, DEP, and NRCS. We're able to advocate to bring the National Water Quality Incentive pilot to one of our watersheds, Maiden Creek. And what that resulted in was $5 million over 5 years for agricultural BMP implementation in this watershed. A great success story, much needed. And this is the first year we'll be implementing that money, which is exciting. Thank you. How is this program sustained? Well, our drinking water systems are members of our program, and there's an annual membership fee schedule, and it's based on population served. So the more customers you have, the higher the fee schedule. So if you're just a mobile home community with 50 residents, the fee might be $25 a year, but it might be it increases your population goes up, much different than if you have 90,000 customers. That helps fund a program coordinator position. And then I'm not just preaching for job security. This is about 10% of what I do on a regular basis, but just having a designated person push a program forward, or a designated person, a go-to person, keeps partners engaged. And it's very important to have that coordinator position to keep pushing things forward. And obviously working with our regulatory agencies and our local regional partners is very, very important. Yeah, we even have a fundraiser. We have a golf tournament every year, raises a couple $1,000s for the program as well. And we've done things with that. We've done a logo contest where we're able to hand out scholarships for the logo contest winners, fun things like that. Go ahead, Vince. You know, there's always challenges, staff turnover, people going on to better opportunities and success is really annoying. No, I'm happy for people going on. It's, you know, people leave to better opportunities, and it kind of leaves a void though sometimes, and leaves questions. Is the next person going to have the same amount of buy-in and energy, or will they even fill the position of the next person? So that is a challenge. You know, when someone leaves, someone new comes in, you have to make that choice to engage that person and bring them into the fold. Emerging contaminants, I think we're like everybody else and kind of sitting back waiting to see what happens with PFAS and PFOA with the Pennsylvania's MCL. You know, we had a high testing number here just recently on a community system in Berks County. Luckily, through their program, we know that community landowner and can work through them through our channels, through our partners. HABs, harmful algal blooms, we're seeing more often and sooner in our reservoirs, and part of that is nutrient availability, and then the other part is climate, weather, and you know, we're not quite sure you know, how to deal with that and what that means. Lead, there's still a lot of old infrastructure out there, especially in our urban areas, where we've got to get lead service lines out of here, and we just need the funds to replace them. Management strategy. When I first came into this program, it already felt like a success, but you know, you just felt like it hadn't reached its full potential yet. You know, and there's always the question, what's next? We've kind of picked the low-hanging fruit, climbing the tree for the fruit at the top of the tree. Do we target implementation? How do we reduce, you know, duplication of effort? And it's always good to think about, okay, what's our next level? And I think that ends my presentation here. I just want to say thank you. I'll take questions in the chat or at the end of the session. I failed to put my contact information in there, but I'll type it in the chat before we end here. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kent. Just a reminder for anybody, we will take questions at the end, but if you have them now, you can use the Q&A feature on your screen and submit them. Next, we have on our program the Planning Commission Vice Chairman for the Borough of Marysville and Perry County, Stephanie Stoner, who is going to talk to us about firsthand experience with getting a well ordinance adopted. So, Stephanie, thank you. The floor is yours.
Good evening. Thank you, Commissioner. My name is Stephanie Stoner, and I've served on the Planning Commission for Marysville Borough for just over 20 years. I'm currently the vice chair, but I've held other positions over the years. Next slide. In the beginning, when we decided to do a well ordinance, it really all started with a short presentation by the Pennsylvania Groundwater Association and explaining, you know, why protecting groundwater was important and why we as a municipality might want to enact, you know, a well ordinance. I did get in touch with the one of the people who are part of that association to see if they still did stuff like they did for us, for our municipality, came and give a brief presentation to kind of get you on your way and to assist with developing well ordinances. And I'm told that they don't have any kind of official presentation, but they're more than willing to come out and talk about, you know, the importance of well ordinances and the importance of proper well development and stuff like that. So that could definitely be a resource for other people also. Once we decided that we were going to do a well ordinance, we looked for some example ordinances. Unfortunately, there weren't a lot of sample well ordinances. A lot of times there are, you know, examples out there that kind of get you started, but there weren't for well ordinances. What we ended up doing is looking for other municipalities that had well ordinances, and the ones listed here are the ones that we kind of started with. We picked the one that seemed most to fit our situation, and then used pieces from the other ones to help fine tune it, you know, to our specific concerns. In our case, we are served mostly by public water, so we have only a few properties that are in need of wells for private drinking water, but we had some other things of concern too. I think if you're going to look at doing a well ordinance, it's important to find a champion or a leader, somebody who's going to, you know, kind of work through the rest of the Planning Commission and to get the ordinance put in place. And then it's basically just plodding through it until you're done, looking at the things that you want to do different in your municipality and going just, you know, line by line through whatever ordinance you're using as your starting point. Next slide, please. In Marysville, we started this process in 2010. As I mentioned, it does include drinking water wells. It would also include geothermal wells, is probably the next most frequent thing that we have here, agricultural supply wells, and monitoring wells. Some of the well ordinances that we looked at also had included gas wells, like those related to Marcellus shale development, but we were able to get some information that indicated that we didn't have the geology in Marysville Borough that we needed to be concerned with gas wells, so we didn't include anything because those were fairly complicated and long parts of some of the other ordinances. It took us until 2015 to finish our well ordinance, and a lot of that had to do with the fact that during that time frame we were also revising our SALDO, our subdivision and land development ordinances, so we really were spending a lot of time on that. But in 2014 I decided that, you know, we had gotten far enough on this well ordinance that I really wanted to move it forward, and so I worked hard on getting, you know, that through the Planning Commission, and developing the ordinance for us also included creating several forms, a permit to construct, modify, or abandon a water well, and that would occur prior to the work, and then a well construction form that would summarize the work after it was completed. We looked at what other municipalities were charging for these permits, and $50 seemed to be a reasonable average going rate. Once we in the Planning Commission thought we had the ordinance together, we sent it to the borough engineer and solicitor for review. We did that in January of 2015, and with their review and you know, any kind of minor tweaks we had to make at the end, there was a public hearing and related advertising that happened in May 2015, and I believe at the same meeting was when our borough council passed that ordinance. In preparation for this talk, I talked to our borough manager, who is relatively new, so doesn't have a lot of history, and I asked if he had found it to be useful, and I kind of got a questioning look from him. So I unfortunately don't think it has had a lot of use. As I noted, we don't have a lot of well drilling that goes on in our borough, because we do have public water here. Next slide. Some of the issues that we had to decide to talk about when we were doing the well ordinance, did we want it to be a standalone ordinance, or did we want to include it in the SALDO or the zoning ordinances? For Marysville, we decided that we wanted it to be a standalone ordinance because there were parts of the ordinance that we wanted to include that involved routine maintenance or things that needed to be done on a regular basis to existing wells, not just, we didn't just want to have an ordinance that dealt with how they were developed. I don't know if it'd necessarily work, but this is a link to our well ordinance. It's our chapter 23, and that's online. So if anybody does want to go look at what our ordinance ended up looking like, they can definitely do that. Some of the other things that we had to talk about is how long would a well be opened, and would it remain undeveloped after it was drilled? So you've punched a hole in the ground, and how long would we allow somebody to kind of leave that as an unknown before we would consider it to be abandoned? And that was important because we do have requirements for when somebody abandons a well. We have a permit for construction and use. There are construction standards. As I mentioned, there's proper abandonment of wells that are no longer going to be used. There's water quality testing for drinking water. And at the time, we only had 12 properties that had private water supplies. There's a handful of geothermal that have been, that exist in the borough. We do have, with a new development, we do have, there's a possibility of 6 or 7 new water supply wells that could potentially be going in the future. Next slide. I'll touch on these really quick. These are some of the general headings that we have. I mean, we have general provisions and definitions, which a lot of ordinances have. Then we have the permit procedure, and that includes those 2 forms that we created, and those will be on the next 2 slides. And the permits, involved all kinds of things in order to develop and construct and develop the well. Next slide. This is one of the forms. This is the form ahead of time. It would be the permit to construct, modify, or abandon a well water. And this is really just tries to summarize what an applicant would be planning on doing. Next slide. And then the well construction form is an after the fact. We wanted a record of what did actually occur. And that's obviously because sometimes you can think you know how things are going to go, and they can end up going a little bit differently. So, but these really summarize a lot of the things that are in our ordinances, in a form that needs to be submitted to the borough. Next slide. So in our ordinance, we also have a section that looks at drilled water supply wells. It looks at location, isolation, distances, things like that, and then the construction of the actual well itself. And that construction does include quantity, storage, and a minimum yield on the well. We also have some standards for groundwater monitoring wells and test wells. Some of the pumps and other equipment, including well cap replacement. It seems like with wells, a lot of times well caps are one of the areas where, where things are let go and they deteriorate, and it's seems to be one of the big areas where contamination can get down into the groundwater through, just faulty well caps on wells. Next slide. We have a section on decommissioning of wells, and that would be where we talk about the proper abandonment of wells. A section on disinfection and how to disinfect a well after work has been done on it. A section to reduce the possibility of cross connections, And then the water quality section has some requirements for, you know, if the water well is going to be used for drinking water, what kind of microbiological, physical, chemical samples have to be collected, and what kind of water quality we want to see. It also gets a little bit into areas of known groundwater concern. If there is an area where there is known contamination, you know, what restrictions go on in that area. Next slide. We talk about water source replacements, agricultural water supplies, and then probably the other big one is the geothermal wells. We opted only to allow closed loop geothermal wells within our borough. And then there's information about construction and permitting those. Next slide. Oh, back. So some of the areas where if you do decide to do your own groundwater or your own well ordinance for your municipality, some of the areas where you can probably get some assistance would be the PA Groundwater Association that I mentioned before. That's really what started us all off. Something you could look for are model well ordinances, but I looked around a little bit. I asked, you know, some of the organizations, because I thought maybe here 10 years later, maybe there would be model well ordinances. And the response I got was, oh, can we see yours? So there weren't any examples of model well ordinances that I could find. But you can do what we did and start with other municipalities' well ordinances. And I have a couple of municipalities nearby listed here that seem to have well ordinances. A lot of counties have well ordinances, you know, that would cover the whole county. And then there's a specific kind of well ordinance, the wellhead protection ordinance, which usually really focuses on the public water supplies that were mentioned earlier. And there's a list of municipalities that have wellhead protection, specific wellhead protection ordinances. Next slide. And, you know, additional support just for general information about wells. Penn State Extension has a good, you know, a good bit of information on the internet. You know, again, I don't know that this link would actually work for anybody, but that's a link. The Pennsylvania DEP and the US EPA, they do not regulate private wells, but they do provide educational information. So there's 2 additional links there where you can just get more information about wells in general and you know, what's good to do and not to do. I remember this last bullet here, I remember that there, because we were developing our own ordinances, that there was talk in the PA legislature about private well construction standards. It seems like once every 5 or 10 years, I hear about it, but it never goes anywhere. It usually starts in one house and, you know, somebody is championing it, but it never seems to develop. But that's something, you know, don't be surprised if you hear about in the future. Maybe there are people looking at, you know, private well construction standards. Next slide. That's it. Okay. Again, thanks for having me. And, you know, if anybody has some questions, I don't have a direct email, but if you email the Marysville Borough at the address there, they can definitely get the information to me, or feel free to put the questions in the question and answer chat below. So thank you very much.
Hey, thank you, Stephanie, for being with us tonight. Very interesting. We'll continue on with the program with Mr. Tyler Schenk. Tyler is a supervisor, restoration and protection for the Susquehanna River Basin Commission. And tonight, Tyler's going to talk about the water quality monitoring in Cumberland County. Tyler, welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thanks for everyone for coming out on this beautiful early summer night. It feels like out there, but I'll jump right in, and Andy, you can adjust to the next slide. My name is Tyler Schenk from the Susquehanna River Basin Commission. I am a biologist there, and we've been doing some monitoring for a number of years there, and our commission's been around we're celebrating our 50th anniversary this year, so we've been around quite a while and done a lot of work in Cumberland County and many across the whole Susquehanna River Basin. But I am going to talk a little bit about the types of water quality monitoring that's in Cumberland County and where you can find some of that information if you're interested. You can certainly reach out to me. I don't know if I put my info on the last slide, so I'll type it in just like kind of in the chat there as well. But to tick down some of the types of water quality monitoring that we kind of focus on, and DEP focuses on, USGS, other entities like that, federal and state government agencies. The first one that I'll talk about is the water chemistry, which is kind of what's coming down the stream in the water column. So we have these number of parameters listed on the slide here. The first bullet lists them out as temperature, pH, dissolved oxygen, specific conductance, and turbidity. Those are common ones that we test in the field. And so some of those you can do right in the stream with certain instruments, and I'll talk about those next. Other ones are some that, normally have to shift off to the lab somewhere. And so things like nitrogen, phosphorus, iron, magnesium, calcium, sodium, solids, suspended sediment, and many, many, many more can go on there. So with those are mostly the lab ones, and those we don't do on the stream side. The next one is category that we touch on is biological. So those things, the two popular ones are macroinvertebrates, which are bugs that you find in the stream. And I'll go into details on all these a little bit in the following slides. And then the other biological one is fish community. So fish health, what types of fish are found in the stream, can tell you a lot about what kind of streams they are. For those that are native to Cumberland County, you have some great fishing here. And even before we got on here with the planning, I heard a lot about a couple streams in the area. And I'm from the area and do a lot on the yellow breeches and heard a lot more discussions about the Latort and other ones in this area. So world-class fisheries in this area. So you guys are probably, some of you probably know these better than I do, even as a biologist in the area. So, and the final category is the physical traits of the stream. So these are habitat assessments. These are things that look at the streams, what kind of grade it's at, what other types of things. And then the final one is the discharge measurement, which is flow. So that's something that's what kind of volume of water is coming down the stream. So Andy, you can go ahead and advance to the next slide, and I'll touch on some of these in more detail. So this first one I'm calling out is what we call continuous in-stream monitoring. So these are the water chemistry parameters that we touched on before. And this is what we call continuous in-stream, is because these instruments are deployed year-round in the stream and taking measurements, in this case, every 15 minutes in the stream. So we have a reading on a couple of sites. We have 2 sites within the county, one on Cumberland County, or one on Conneaut and one in the Yellow Breeches. These ones are actually part of they have multiple reasons we're in the county. One is for early warning system. So that's providing real-time water quality monitoring to drinking water suppliers. So they're upstream of Kristi's, PA American's intakes on both the Conneaut and Yellow Breeches, and then also of United's water intakes as well. So these ones are out there all the time in monitoring, and they can send warnings or alerts to the drinking water suppliers if something was coming down that we shouldn't be coming down, or if a level of turbidity is getting really high and they need to prepare for this. If a storm came through and it is causing the water to get really turbid, then that's one reason they might need to treat a little bit higher than other ones. So there is a link on there, and I realize it's PowerPoint, so you can't click on it now, but as we distribute these materials, we can certainly, this is something, a resource for you to look into these things more easily on your own. One other advantage of the continuous in-stream monitoring analysis is that it collects, as I said, every 15 minutes. So having these installed for almost 3 years now, going on 4, I guess, and some others throughout the state are going on 10 years. It provides us very large data set. So it can, with all this data, you can see if things are changing in real time. So every 5 years or 10 years, you can run a trends report. Is something that just kind of gives you an error, whether it's going up or down in the right direction, or if something's changing a little bit over time. It really gives you that fine look at things, but also a long-term picture as well. So that's very valuable for us in the data analysis world. Go ahead, Andy, to the next slide. I just want to show a map of where these 2 continuous in-stream monitors, their early warning system SONs do sit. The one on Conneaut is just north of Carlisle, and the one in the Yellow Breeches is down towards Lisburn area, if you're familiar with that way. And just to highlight That's fine, Nick. Go ahead, Lee. That's good. No, that's okay. You can go on the next slide. No worries. So the next part of the water quality is something that we touch on, is kind of the lab sample, I call it. It's something that's more often done with taking a water sample and shipping back to a lab. So, and this is a sediment and nutrient assessment. So this is a program that the SRBC and USGS work together on. DEP is involved as well, and this has been a long-term project. This has a lot of implications across the Bay network. It's all up and down the Chesapeake Bay area. This is one that kind of drives the WIP, the Watershed Implementation Plan, which I think we'll hear on a little bit later. Things that are driving the nutrient and phosphorus coming through the streams and getting all the way to Chesapeake Bay. That's the big focus for the last couple of years, if you've heard those terms around here. So those two, like I said, that we also have there's also two of those in the county. There's one on kind of Gwinnett and Yellow Breeches as well. Similar areas, not exactly the same sites where we're at for the in-stream monitors, but they're also in those things. And these are collected monthly, and then some of these have been collected. These in particular, I think, have been collected probably going on 15, 20 years. There's some in the basin that have been going on 30, 40 years now. And so these have really long-term data sets and target storm events as well. And storms are really important because a lot of stuff moves during storms. So you can look in the streams and you can kind of eyeball it and realize that, a lot of sediment moves during storms. Sometimes these streams look like chocolate milk out there. And that's when, up to 90% of the sediment can be moved through a system in just a handful of severe storms throughout the year. So it's really important to collect those, and not just the, nice sunny days like today when it's nice to be out there on a stream and grabbing a water sample. You have to be out there in the bad weather too, to make sure we're grabbing all sorts of measurements to get a good prediction of what's coming down the stream across the whole year. Go ahead, Andy, you can flip the next slide. One other thing that we've developed recently at our SRBC is a water quality index. It's looking at some of the common lab parameters that are often collected by us, DEP, USGS, and other entities, and develop a way to compare things across basins, across the county, across streams and things like that. So we look at 9 common parameters. Like I said, common ones are phosphorus, nitrogen, sediment, sodium, those types of things. And they're scored individually across the county and also across the basin. And then it scales up to an aggregate on a watershed scale, which is a HUC 10, which is a more technical term, but that's just kind of the size of the watershed that they're at. And you can flip to the next slide and I'll show an example of what we have on our website here for our water quality index. So here's a map and a viewer that's on our website, and it has zoomed into Cumberland County, and you'll see there's a couple different HUC 10s, which are larger, medium-sized watersheds. You see the Yellow Breeches kind of all one, or mostly one, I should say. And then there's the kind of what it was kind of broken out into 3 different ones in the yellow there. And they're kind of graded on just kind of a poor to excellent condition, just to each other. You can see that the dots represent each individual measurement that we've had over the last 20 years in these areas. The hollow ones don't have all the parameters collected, so they can't be performed or be judged on these parameters. But the other ones you can see, and the darker they are, the purple is kind of the excellent, the goods, the dark blue, and then the green's the fair. And so the shading on the polygon shapes on here is actually kind of an aggregate average score for that area. So you can see that, there's not as many in the County of Gwinnett, so sometimes it could be that, but you can see just on a rough scale, zooming throughout the whole basin or about the county, you can see that at times there's better conditions coming off, the South Mountain area of the Yellow Breeches rather than some of the County of Gwinnett areas. But that's not to say that all streams in that area are good, bad, or anything in between. Those are just the data points that we had for the last 20 years. So it's not an exhaustive list by any means, but that's kind of how we view it, just to give another area of ways to compare as to where you sit in certain geographic regions. Go ahead, Andy. So another very important way to look at stream health is through biological monitoring. And this one's very important to DEP in particular. They use this method, and others do as well. But since they're kind of the regulatory agency, they use the biological monitoring, particularly macroinvertebrate health, to impair or unimpair streams. So determine if a stream health is impaired by some sort of pollutant, or if it's not impaired in good shape for organisms to grow in. So some of the pictures here, these are grabbed off a site I like to use for helping identify these macroinvertebrates. So these are stonefly, mayfly, and what did I say, stonefly, mayfly, and caddisfly larvae. So these are the ones that you find in the stream. They're zoomed in. They're obviously not that big. But sometimes you can turn over rocks and see them in the stream. And what we do is go out there and kick with a net, disturb the substrate, collect them all into a big, large net, bring them back to the lab, identify, count them. And some of these bugs in particular here on the screen are really intolerant to pollutants. So if you see these in the stream, you know that they're surviving in high quality water. So that's kind of how it works. If there's, you know, just a few certain types of, just if it's loaded with just worms or beetles or something like that, not that they're bad insects, but they can tolerate high pollutant loads. So if you're just finding those, you know that, you know, some of these higher ones aren't there, you know that you might have some sort of impairment. So these, like I said, these are used by DEP to impair and unimpair streams. So you can flip to the next slide, and here's a map of impaired waterways in the county, and you can see that there's not a ton. Certainly, there's certainly counties with way more. There's certain counties with less, depending where you are across the state. But there's certainly some impairments across the watershed, and some of you may realize that, some of you may not, and that's okay. You know, there's for different things. You know, so the color coding, and I know this map might be a little hard to see. It's kind of zoomed in a little bit, but siltation is something. It's another kind of word for sediment. So there's a lot of sediment coming down. So those are kind of the dark green streams that you'll see. The red ones that stick out, those are for metals. So those are coming off the acid rain areas of the upper Yellow Breeches area. So there's other things. There's disturbance, there's nutrients, there's a couple of miles impaired of this and that. So that's something that you need to know, you know, if you're looking and curious as to where you focus your efforts sometimes in different areas, or just so you know what you're getting into out there in the streams. And the last thing that I'll touch on is like I said, is the physical part of monitoring. And so USGS has a great resource, and they're out there. They put in these stream gauges, and they maintain 4 gauges in the county, and they're in real time as well. And you can go on their website listed here, and you can see what kind of stream flow or how high the water is basically coming down these streams. So this was one I grabbed, you know, a couple of weeks ago of kind of to go in. It's a picture, but you can go on there and see in the last week or so, you know, if there's been rain, you're going to see the stream flow jump up quite a bit. If it's been a ton of rain, it's going to jump up a lot. So if you're interested in wondering if it's, you know, on one side, if it's good to go fishing, then you might want to consult these. If you know, if the stream gets above 400, this is in CFS, cubic feet per second, but there's also another one that's gauge height. So if it gets above 2 feet, you know, at that gauge, you know that maybe it's not good to go out and wade in or something like that. But this gives us a good idea. We use this quite a bit onto calculating how much of a pollutant is coming downstream. Like I said, if there's a big storm and we're looking at nitrogen pollution or something like that, if it's a heavy storm and we know how much water is coming down, and we take a reading of, in this vial of 500 milliliters of water, how much nitrogen is coming in there, you know, can do some quick math, or not so quick math, but you get to the point of how much pollutant is coming down the stream and ultimately hitting other rivers and streams, Susquehanna, Chesapeake Bay, and then such. So that I ran through a lot there pretty quick, but you know, I hopefully provided some resources that you could click on when some of these are available, or we can certainly pass these around. I do have my information there on the screen if you have any questions, but I'll certainly entertain some at the end of this presentation as well. So appreciate everyone coming out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tyler. Next, we have Erin Ledovic from HRG. She's the Countywide Action Plan Coordinator for Cumberland County and Project Manager Civil Engineer. We also have Lori Glace, who's Conservation Analyst for our Cumberland County Conservation District. And they're going to be providing the Countywide Action Plan updates and implementation, Conservation District Program opportunities. So ladies, whoever wants to go first, you're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner DiFilippo. As he said, I'm Erin Ledovic. You can actually go to the next slide. And I'm a civil engineer with HRG. Last year, we were hired by Cumberland County to lead the Countywide Action Plan development process. And with me is Lori Glace. I guess she'll introduce herself whenever she comes up here in a few slides. So in terms of our agenda, I'm going to speak today about the Countywide Action Plan connection to clean water. Looking at the participants list, I think a lot of you participated in helping us develop the plan last year. If you don't have that personal background, I encourage you to go to the Clean Water Cumberland website on Cumberland County Planning's webpage. You'll be able to find our plan, a video that gives you a bit of an overview of it, and other information. Lori then is going to talk about the Conservation District program opportunities for clean water that currently exist. So taking one step back, or a bunch of steps back, on the map here is an outline of the Chesapeake Bay watershed within the state of Pennsylvania. All of the counties that are within the watershed are listed here. And water quality importance takes on different scales depending on who you talk to. So US EPA cares about this outlined area of the Chesapeake watershed within Pennsylvania. But on the next slide, when we developed the countywide action plan last year, we did some analysis that helped us determine that the 5 watersheds in blue, the bolder blue, are our priorities for water quality improvement. The analysis included ranking of county comprehensive plan goals, unhealthy stream locations, locations of preserved farms, and areas of highest nitrogen levels. Next slide. The measuring stick of success for the countywide action plan, or CAP, from a regulatory perspective, is the CAST model, or the Chesapeake Assessment Scenario Tool, which looks at layers of information that estimate nitrogen pollution across the landscape at a very large scale, and best management practices that are utilized across the landscape. BMPs vary, but include stormwater basins, manure storage facilities, covering heavy use areas with a roof to avoid stormwater, intercepting soils and manure, wetlands, and stream restoration. Next slide. But when it comes down to it, experience tells us that BMPs and water quality data don't get enough people interested in action to scale up improvements. There are more studies available today that identify the economic, recreational, and public health benefits of the work. So despite our team being interested in what the CAST model says in 2025, which is our plan implementation deadline, the community needs to see these co-benefits realized for the program to really be successful. Next slide. There are studies that quantify the co-benefits of so-called water farming, or working the land with clean water, as a priority, not a result. There are recent studies too on dairy farm and soil health resilience when new practices are employed. And the American Farmland Trust has a guide out now that actually quantifies outcomes of BMP work on the landscape. As this information is reviewed by stakeholders as another communication tool with landowners, funders, and local leaders, my hope is that all of the clean water work we do becomes more of our priority. And as stated earlier, I believe the slides will be distributed, so you'll have access to these links. Next slide. One measure of success on CAP implementation is the funds raised so far by the county and the vision of an application that's not yet been decided on, which is listed there under National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, the second row under the headings. We appreciate the attention by NIFWF, State Conservation Commission, DEP to date. By our estimates, but we'll need to raise $7 to $10 million per year for our goals to be achievable, whether through grants, private investment, et cetera. These dollars don't need to be all grants or distributed by the county, so we appreciate today's forum as an opportunity to educate more stakeholders about our intersecting needs. Next slide. CAP implementation, like any long-term vision, isn't easy to do because of the maze of funding options, agencies, landowners, and time constraints. But the goal is for the plan to keep making progress forward rather than feeling like partners are running in place. So as county staff and partners are doing what they do really well with respect to getting more ag BMPs, stream buffers, and stormwater BMPs installed, HRG is continually assessing the state of progress so that we can identify methods to scale up results and test some options. The mission is not only to achieve our plan goals by 2025, but also develop a more long-term community commitment to clean water, as the Clean Water Cumberland logo on the previous slide represents. So I'll turn it on to Lori.
All right, thank you, Erin. So tonight I want to talk to you guys about some opportunities and programs that we have at the Conservation District. One of our goals at the Conservation District is to advocate stewardship and protection of our natural resources of Cumberland County to sustain and improve the quality of life to its citizens. So a lot of the programs that we have here at the Conservation District are not necessarily focused on source water protection, but definitely help protect our source waters and our watersheds in general. So the first program that we have is our nutrient management program. So this program does deal with all nutrients that are applied to our farms. Act 38 plans, our conservation district is a level 2 delegated district, which means that we have the task of writing a few plans a year based on staff timing and reviewing nutrient management plans. We have inspections of our Act 38 participating farms for compliance, which are really big farming operations that have a lot of animals on a small, well, not small, but per acre basis. So we have concentrated animal operations, CAOs, and concentrated animal feeding operations, which are CAFOs. So a lot of those are chicken houses or hog barns and are really big dairies. We also promote a lot of outreach, education, and we do complaint investigations. So we have annual manure management workshops, as well as an annual corn planter clinic where we do promote our cover crop programs. So next slide. Our next slide is our Chesapeake Bay program. This program is changing a little bit with our focus on the Chesapeake Bay. We have been doing pre-side dress soil nitrogen testing, PSNT. We hire interns to help cover all of the acres of corn that we go out and test. So this program is to prevent unnecessary nitrogen application to corn crops. So the interns and our Chesapeake Bay and our nutrient management technician will go out, they'll take soil samples, and then they'll bring it back to the district office and they'll run tests on it to see what those levels are. And then they have a consultation with the farm operators to let them know, hey, we recommend adding more nutrients, or we recommend cutting down how much fertilizer you apply to the corn. Implementation of BMPs. We do a lot of manure stack pads, concrete heavy use areas, poultry composters in the past. We have a really great program that has started, that is the Conservation Excellence Grant Program, CEG. And that is to help farms who have conservation plans install those conservation best management practices. We have a really awesome cover crop incentive program. Last year was our biggest year ever. Installing those cover crops on corn silage or soybean fields to get cover so that when it rains over the winter time, that soil and all the nutrients are not running off into our waterways. We also have the Chesapeake Bay Farm Inspection Program. This is a DEP program that any farm that generates or spreads manure or utilizes manure on their properties do need that Chapter 93 manure management plan. And the other side of that is an agricultural erosion and sediment control plan. Next slide. We also have a really big erosion and sediment control program. I'm sure everybody has seen a lot of the giant warehouses that have been going on in the county. So with our ENS program, we are a delegated level 3 program. So any site that is over 1 acre does require a NPDES program, which is a National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit. And those permits are designed to cut down on the erosion that would otherwise run off of the construction sites. With this, with being a delegated level 3 program, we do have an engineer who works both with the erosion and sediment control program, with post-construction stormwater management plan reviews, as well as our ag program. But with the post-construction stormwater management plan is after the site is constructed, we need to make sure that there are controls in place that all that water that from the property that was recently changed to be developed, that it doesn't all run off into our waterways, that we are trying to promote infiltration and we are detaining that water, that we're not causing flood and stream issues. So our ENS staff also investigate complaints. And if need be, they do bring the sites into compliance. So we always stress education before compliance. So once again, we do hold an annual ENS workshop for engineers to get those plans to be the best plans that we can have. Next slide. The watershed program, this is one of the programs that I work with. It supports water conservation through educational activities, our watershed association support, grant writing, project implementation. So we are one of the lucky counties in the state. We have 5 active watershed association groups. So we have the Conneaut Watershed Association, which I think we have quite a few members from CCWA on tonight. We have the Middle Spring Watershed Association down in Shippensburg. We have Big Spring Watershed Association near Newville. We have the Yellow Breeches Watershed Association, and then we also have Friends of Opossum Lake, and they are doing some really great work there too. So one of the things that we have been trying to do is connect everyone within those watershed groups. So we did start having our Tri-County Watershed Association meetings, and that is a really great coordination between Franklin County and Adams County. And it's really great to have these watershed groups support each other and find out, hey, what's worked really good in your county and what maybe should we start focusing on here. In the works, we do have a really great project on the Yellow Breeches from Boiling Springs down to Allenberry Resort. And tomorrow night, we have a rain garden workshop at Upper Allen Township. I also want to say CVTU, Cumberland Valley Trout Unlimited, has been really active in the county as well for stream restoration. So next slide. We also have the Dirt, Gravel, and Low Volume Roads program here in the county. We don't really think of Cumberland County having a lot of dirt roads, but we do have quite a few miles and they do require a lot of maintenance. And the main goal of the program is to reduce non-point source pollution, especially sediment loads, to our streams. So it is a local grant program that the money that we received goes directly to Cumberland County. So yearly we get about $100,000 for dirt and gravel and about $125,000 for our low volume road projects. So the program focuses on drainage issues, wet ditches, wet road base, lack of crown, poor surface. There's a big stream crossing there. So when we have 2 small stream openings, we get some really massive stream erosion. So we also focus on those and also disconnecting any ditches that we can from the stream. So if we can get some treatment from that or to that water away from the stream, we definitely like to have that. So next slide. So what are the opportunities that we have? So we do have educational grants that we do like to apply for. Currently, we do have that rain garden workshop that it was a 2-part series. The first part, we talked about what a rain garden is to residents, and tomorrow night we are reiterating how important rain gardens are, and then we're actually going to show a live demonstration of planting some plants. We have an educational grant for stormwater and stream education tools. So that is in the form of the Penn State Extension Rain to Drain activity set, as well as a stream geofluvial morphology, which is fancy for how stream flows, stream tables. So I'm really excited to get those tools out to our educators and get more students thinking about what they see when they look at a stream. I already mentioned the Yellow Breeches trout habitat program. And then we also do have the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation cover crop incentive program for our next crop season. And we do have the Conservation Excellence Grant, which will help install BMPs on ag lands. So I do have more. So special events, we do have our annual tree sale. I think this current year's tree sale was also one of the biggest tree sales that we've had. We have an annual rain barrel sale. We do have a little bit of a waiting list for that, but we still encourage people to contact us if they are interested in a rain barrel. I mentioned that we do have an erosion sediment control workshop that is usually geared towards our engineering community. And then we have an annual corn planter clinic. One thing that I do not have up there, and I'm not sure how I missed it with this being our water forum, I completely forgot to put on our drinking water testing program. So we do have a program. It's the second Wednesday of every month. I'll put that in the chat here as soon as I'm done talking. Actually, I already had it loaded. So I do encourage residents to get their water tested so that they know what the quality of water is that is coming to them. Educational, we can do presentations, we can do workshops, we can do activities. We love spreading the good word about clean water. And then partner coordination is huge. We love our partners. We use technical assistance, programs assistance, always connections and networking. I always tell everybody that I'm not necessarily an expert in any one subject, but I am a jack of all trades, and I can usually find somebody who is an expert. So next slide. So future opportunities. So this is a call to action. If you're excited about clean water as much as we are, we definitely encourage you to join or even form one of our countywide action plan teams. So with the CAP, we looked at a lot of different areas of what we can do. So forestry, streamside work, municipal leads. So definitely, if you're interested, we can definitely find a place for you to volunteer. And then also our watershed associations are always really great avenues for that too. We love to collaborate on projects. Taking the focus off of one person doing everything, having that partnership, working with partners who do have expertise, definitely makes that project more successful. And data, for us to get to the goals that we need, we definitely want to take credit for the amazing work that is being done. We love to give credit where credit is due. We definitely need some really great examples so that we can use that for our promotional activities, and definitely help get the word out there. It seems kind of silly, but when you're talking to friends and family, definitely help spread the word about why clean water is as important as it is. So thank you, everyone. If you have any questions, I'll definitely take them afterwards.
Thanks, Aaron and Lori, appreciate it. We'll get to our final speaker now, Elizabeth Grant. She's with the Cumberland County Planning Department. Elizabeth, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, I'm Elizabeth Grant, and I'm a planner with Cumberland County. My work here is focused on supportive planning initiatives, subdivision and land development, and ordinance reviews, and the implementation of the countywide action plan that you heard about previously. Other programs administered or facilitated by our planning department include farmland preservation, recycling and waste, vector control, and parks, trails, greenways, and open space planning. Next slide. My goals for today are to provide a brief overview of some of the county planning processes and their linkage to water quality. And then I'd like to describe some of the resources that Cumberland County Planning has available for municipalities related to this work, and how the idea of a green infrastructure model guide was suggested to achieve objectives of our plans and also meet the needs expressed by our partners. Andy, would you please click through the next 2 slides, just in the interest of time? Thank you. Great, perfect. So those 2 previous slides just showed some of the planning processes managed and implemented at the county level, and there are links to see where those plans are. They are all listed here. And what's important to note is that all of these planning processes managed at the county level are very closely integrated with one another, and they have really strong linkages to water and water quality. And the first 2 plans I have listed there are recent planning projects that are more problem-oriented and focused on actions taken on a variety of levels, from individuals to varying levels of government and also businesses, that are really practical solutions are needed to achieve a collective impact. And DEP is the lead agency working with us on both of those planning processes. And they are the countywide action plan, which you've heard about, focused on reducing pollutants entering our local waterways, and also the local climate action plan, which we are currently in development on. And one of the key factors for the climate action plan in the relevance to water is that warmer, wetter weather is anticipated specifically for the Cumberland County and the region. So we really need to focus on greenhouse gas emission reductions, but also on mitigation strategies and resiliency approaches to deal with some of the anticipated additional stormwater we'll be facing. The hazard mitigation plan was just completed in 2020. And one of the interesting relationships between that plan and climate change is that because of the amplifying effect that climate change can have on many disasters and many hazards that we face, It's a cross-cutting initiative that's addressed in all of the areas related to hazard mitigation. All right, next slide, please. Oh, actually, I had one more thing on the previous slide. Apologize. I did also want to reference the land partnerships plan. It is one of the plans that we are currently looking at updating, and it is a key planning initiative of the county related to greenways, open space, and also the recreational aspects of the resources in the region. And review and update of these plans is really vital, so we remain focused on implementation and that they're not just planning processes that sit on the shelves. And I just wanted to also reference the water trail guide for the Conno de Gwinnett and Yellow Breeches Creeks, which was developed and it helps to implement one of the goals for outreach of the land partnerships plan. This slide in particular shows just two of the communications department infographics that were prepared in support of our clean water plan. And it highlights the ecosystem services and the economic value provided by our natural resources that are both dependent upon and also supportive of water quality. Messaging like this helps to reinforce and remind people of the value of these features, both to the economy and also to the individual. And another tool to explore the value of ecosystem services and landscape resources that support them is the Return on Environment report, which one was developed for Cumberland County and also subsequently on a local scale in Penn Township. It can help prioritize areas for special protection based on the richness of ecosystem services located in specific geographic areas, and many of those are connected to waterways. Next slide, please. So the county has various roles, the county planning department has various roles with respect to our municipalities. We provide extensive educational opportunities in the form of workshops. We have a workshop specifically about Planning Commission activities and requirements. It's called Planning Commission University. We also hold trainings on a variety of topics of interest to municipalities, and we hold regular outreach meetings where we can address some of those topical issues. We also provide extensive technical support. Members of the planning department conduct outreach through Planning Commission meetings. We attend those meetings, and we provide guidance and direct technical assistance to draft ordinances or comprehensive plans with our municipalities. One other significant area is through funding. We have funding available through our planning grants fund for plan development and also ordinance amendments or adoptions. I mentioned the Land Partnerships Program. We have a grant program that provides financial assistance to municipalities and nonprofit stakeholders. It provided almost $250,000 of funding in 2020. It has worked closely with a watershed organization over the past few years to implement conservation landscaping, interpretive signage, and restoration work on a stream. And also we have funding available to implement the countywide action plan for clean water. Next slide, thank you. So this just lists some potential elements that could be included in a green infrastructure guide. We have heard kind of repeatedly through some of these planning processes and outreach that we've done with municipalities that this type of planning is really, and this type of guidance is really a need among municipalities. A couple projects I just wanted to highlight briefly involved a parking reduction strategies that we've been working on with municipalities, including boroughs of Mount Holly Springs, Newville, and Newburgh. And this work was done to try to help them right-size their parking based on actual projected needs, rather than just on minimum parking requirements alone. Many existing municipal ordinances really focused specifically on those set minimums. and they give a set number of spaces for a specific use. But many of these criteria are based on antiquated standards of consumer behavior. They don't account for the unique features of individual businesses. So they also don't include maximum amount of spaces, which is really a significant distinction that this kind of guidance can provide to help limit our impervious pavement and surfaces. Shared spaces are also a consideration if they're appropriate for a development site, and can be accommodated by compatible needs or schedules of the business. For example, if you have a development with a business that is office-based and has a lot of daytime parking demand combined with a use that might focus on dining and entertainment that would utilize the parking spaces in the evening, those could be compatible. One other area of green infrastructure guidance that was suggested through our work was in conservation landscaping. Converting lawn to native plant or meadow areas is accepted as a strategy to help reduce pollutants entering our waterways, to increase infiltration and allow for better reduction of flow, and also reduce nutrient applications. So we recognize the need to review ordinances and make sure that their weed ordinances and other provisions would allow for conservation landscaping. And we're working closely with DCNR, Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, Law and Conversion Advisory Council on that effort. So bottom line, many municipalities don't have staff or dedicated staff or funding to implement some of these practices on their own, or they may not have ordinances that support them. By providing opportunities and options in a comprehensive guide, municipalities can have the opportunity to select those ordinance elements that make sense in their communities. So this is just an overview of a proposed approach to developing a green infrastructure guide that we will be developing through collecting input from municipalities to determine their needs, to research best practices and other model ordinances in other communities. The guide will be developed to include green infrastructure models, and funding may be available through that Cumberland planning grants that I mentioned to adopt and amend ordinances to apply some of these standards. There's my email address. If you are, have expertise or passion for green infrastructure in Cumberland County, please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. I also want to thank all the speakers for coming out tonight and giving their presentations. A lot of good information here, really appreciate it. Have not received any questions from any of our attendees. Andy, we are pushing at 8 o'clock. I know that we do have a few pre-drafted questions. If you'd like me to ask a couple, I will do so.
Commissioner, I wonder if maybe we should throw a general question out to all of our speakers in terms of, we heard about so many different aspects of water, surface and groundwater in the county and why it's important and all the great efforts that are going on to protect it. But I wonder if any of the speakers would be interested in kind of highlighting what they see as the biggest challenges facing Cumberland County, let's say in the next decade when it comes to our water resources. I wonder if anyone could sort of summarize what the biggest challenges on the horizon they see and what steps the county could be taking to address those. I mean, and feel free to just say, double the efforts we already talked about tonight, but I'd be curious if we missed anything tonight in particular. And speakers, feel free to show your faces here again and let us see at least one last time before we sign off for our audience.
Andy, thanks for the question. I'll bite. This is
Great.
Katie Hess with the South Mountain Partnership. The question, as I understood it, is what do I think is the biggest hurdle to clean water over the next decade? So speaking purely from your local conservation landscape initiative, you know, as is the case in many regions throughout Pennsylvania and the nation, the next decade is really going to make or break our regional sustainability. Our ability to say that we have healthy local waters and a healthy hydrological system, that we have been able to retain our water quality and quantity, that we understand our carrying capacity for population levels. Are we properly managing, sort of like I guess we saw Berks County speak to our source water areas. We know that Cumberland County is one of the fastest growing counties in the state, and we are both blessed and cursed by that, right? And all we can seek to do is balance that nature and commerce and that need for balance and to work together. So I think that is our biggest challenge, is working together, getting out of our silos and coming up with true solutions so that we can have the best of everything. It's never an either or scenario. It's always how do we put our thinking caps on, create solutions, and strive to do it all. And so I think, you know, here in Cumberland County, we know that the rubber meets the road in our municipal governing structure, and they need assistance, they need help. As Erin pointed out in her presentation, a lot of them don't have the staff capacity or the tools that they need at the moment to really face this head on. So just continuing to support them and to draw our programs and our funding around them to support them, I think is going to make any of this possible, and to keep the health and the safety and the beauty of this region over the next 10 years.
Andy, this is Rick Rovegno. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to ask Kent Himelright. I never like to reinvent wheels. Kent, you have a countywide integrated source water protection program. What would you suggest we should all consider here as the most important aspect to get an initiative and a program and an undertaking like that underway here in Cumberland County? What advice would you give us? Because Berks has developed prior to us, so you probably have some insights there.
I'd say that the whole program wouldn't be possible without the backing of the public water suppliers. So I think for Cumberland, in Cumberland County, it would be to find that champion or group of champion public water suppliers who can really fuel a program like that along. You know, there's the Berks County Source Water Protection Program. You know, I've heard someone refer to it as the perfect confluence of things happening. You had the Schuylkill Action Network happening. You had DEP's SWP program coming along, and then you had this, you know, group of water suppliers and wastewater treatment plant providers come along and form the Water Set Association, or the Water and Sewer Association, and it all kind of morphed into the Source Water Protection Program. But the biggest thing there, and the biggest thing I see day to day here in Berks County, is really good water providers, really good municipalities and wastewater treatment facilities working together and being champions, pushing the program forward.
Thank you.
Commissioner DiFilippo, that's all I have.
Okay.
Unless anybody else wants to chime in, I know it is late.
All right. Well, thank you all for participating, and I'm sure we will meet again soon. Andy or Rick, if you have any closing statements, I guess we'll end it with that.
I was just going to quickly, before we get to Rick, just ask Katie if you could mention one more time how people will be able to access the recording if they're interested in sharing that with other people who maybe couldn't attend tonight.
Of course, yes. The South Mountain Partnership does this for lots of different organizations, just to add capacity and help them implement their ideas like tonight. So we often offer the use of our Zoom account, and then we upload the recording of that meeting or that webinar to our South Mountain Partnership YouTube page. So you can see it on the YouTube page, and to ensure that you get a reminder and notification that that link has posted, we will send you a follow-up email if you registered for this meeting. And if you join our newsletter list, you'll also be in the know. It's an every other month newsletter, and we'll be sure to notify you in that newsletter as well that recording has been made available.
Andy and Commissioner DiFilippo, thank you again to everyone. Andy, I know you've done a lot of work kind of putting this thing together. Commissioner Fauci, we appreciate you being here. Commissioner DiFilippo, we appreciate you moderating this. We look forward to having more educational forums in the future. And I just say God bless to everybody. Stay safe. And gosh, aren't we all looking forward to getting back outside and with friends and face to face, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you, everybody. Stay safe.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you, Rick. Thanks again, Andy. You did great.
Thank you all. Thank you all. Take care. Good night.